British actor Idris Elba has told the BBC that he will relocate to Africa within the next decade as part of his plans to support the continent's movie industry. The 52-year-old star of this hit series The Wire is behind nascent projects to build a film studio on the Tanzanian island of Zanzibar, as well as one on the Ghanaian capital, Accra. This is very exciting stuff. There is so much opportunity, there's so much excitement, there's so much things happening in Africa, and the diaspora needs to pay attention. They need to be part of it. They need to see the growth that's happening here and take part. If you're interested in seeing what's going on, how you can participate, what the pitfalls are, and what the solutions to those pitfalls might be, you're in the right place. Stay tuned. I am one of those diaspora that realized that the West has peaked and that Africa is a growth place. It's a place where the population is growing, there's massive growth in demographics, knowledge is growing, and knowledge is growing because every day we're becoming more connected. Africans are seeing what's going on in the world, they're educating themselves, and they're uplifting their circumstances all over the continent. There's a role that the diasporans around the world can play. They can either come back and move to Africa, like I've done, or they can figure out ways to contribute and support Africa from where they are. So let's have another example of the perspective of someone that's been around the world, made money around the world in the West, and still thinks Africa is the place to be. Let's check it out.
And let me tell you what, Piers, like when I look even at myself, I go in Africa, I spend a lot of time in Africa, and one of the reasons, like I'm setting a operation there, a system for me to return, because like after traveling around the world, let me tell you the truth, the best place for me to be at, the best place if I have to choose, is Africa, right? I return in Africa, set my business, because everything there is open. The fear there is open. When you come here, everything is saturated. You have to get settled of what's the leftover. You know, back there you can take over. You don't need to get the leftover, but you can take over, and that's what a lot of Africans are doing now.
It's a great thing to hear.
Look at the excitement in his face. Look at the enjoyment. Look at like the confidence that he's got talking in that way.
We have a lot of talent. We have a lot of workers. You go in the UK, in every sector, you will see some person that is outstanding, that is from Africa, from Nigeria, from Cameroon, from Ghana, from West Africa, wherever you name it, you will find them in different fields around here. And I think it's about time that we use those skills and those talents to build our own continent.
So how long has Black people, African people, been building other people's countries, other people's continents? How long has there been an exit of our talents from the continent to the West? My dad exited Africa to just do that, to find a better opportunity. And many people still think that way, but the tide is turning, the mentality is changing. Who wants to go to the West and join the rat race? Who wants to participate in all of this woke culture and divisive politics culture of right and left and polarizing standards? Who wants to participate in World War III, which is, you know, a possibility right now? People are seeing that the continent has a demographic that's exploding and there's growth here. Whereas the growth in all these other places are not happening. People are not getting married, they're not having kids. Why are they not doing that? Because having kids is too much of a burden. Everyone is self-centered and focused on them. They've lost their community. They've lost their imagination on what could be. They're just thinking about surviving, the rat race, the grind. And yes, you've got entrepreneurs and smart people and wonderful things. You know, it's a generalization. But the growing understanding that life can be lived in Africa with dignity, with everything that you could need to live a fulfilled life, a sustained and healthy life, can be done in Africa. And Francis, someone that's been around the world, understands that. But how? How is this going to be done? It is a difficult question. One of the things I'm trying to figure out being here on the continent for the last year and a half is figuring out how I can be of economic use, how I can boost myself, the community, and the people around me. How can we survive? How can we thrive? And Africans on the continent are asking this question. And also those outside the continent need those answers. So people of all levels are trying to figure it out. One way is to come here and roll up your sleeves, but there's people thinking about it. And there's a gentleman here that I would like to highlight who has written a whole manifesto, a Nigerian man. Let's hear what he has to say.
My name is Tony Oyewole. I'm a Nigerian. I was born in Kaduna, in the northern part of the country. Did all of my schooling in Nigeria here. A lot of the interaction you find out there is criticizing the government, complaining about what is happening. And I always remind them that, look, if we expend half of the energy that we expend on complaining, on professing solutions, we'll probably be out of the problems we're encountering.
If you know anything about me, you've seen on my channel, I am not a victim mindset kind of person. I'm very much for taking action. And I love that this guy has the same mentality. He's here saying, if we spend less time complaining about the problems and just get to action, we'll force a path through. We'll get through the corruption. We'll get through these things. These are huge, massive problems, I know, but you know, take action, let's take action. And we don't have to do the largest scale stuff in the world. You can start small, you can start as an individual. You don't have to be, you know, this huge corporation that figures out and messes with government. You can start on a small scale. And if enough people do that, then you start to create change and a chain reaction, and other people can start to participate as well.
Presently, as a country, and even globally, Africa needs massive investment to actualize its potentials. At about the time I was working on this, I think the GDP of the African American community was about $600 billion. The GDP of
it's much bigger now. It's probably about 1.5 trillion now.
Okay. So, and I just said, look, if you can even get 1% of that, if you can get 1% of that to be invested in Africa, it could make a whole lot of difference.
Now, this is where I think people might say, and I had the thought as well, that this is very idealistic. One of the things that I've encountered since I've moved to Uganda is the understanding that there is a divide between Africans and African Americans. There's a cultural divide, obviously, but there's also underlying resentments that can happen on both sides. And some people are very happy to make that delineation, to create that divide. And ultimately, I think that hurts us. I think we have to look at it as we are cousins. We have common interests. We are not the paramount group in white countries, in Western countries, yet we're the paramount group in Africa. There's so much knowledge and talent in the West, and then there's so much people and resources in Africa. Those two things need to marry. The ultimate word here is unity. There needs to be a vested interest in both sides coming together. And that's what I think this guy's outlining. Yes, it's idealistic and it's difficult and it would take a long time. We cannot afford to be divided, guys. And I see too much division. I see too much division. Even within the continent, let's just take out the African Americans. The tribalism is, you know, it's criminal. We need to really see ourselves as a group. We need to trade with each other within the borders of Africa. We need to be fair with each other, see that we have shared values and shared interests. And then we can start to take over. If we're divided, more of the same will happen. We can complain about colonialism, but we let them have it because we don't have any unity. We give away our brothers and our cousins and our petty disputes or our illogical disputes. We've got to set that aside. So if you were thinking that this is idealistic, I had the same thought. And he's about to go into the interests that we can have despite our differences.
And when I'm saying invest in Africa, I'm not saying charity donations. I'm saying invest in strategic industrial projects. The Arabs, yes, they sell crude oil, but they have investment in the entire value chain. In Africa, you export cocoa, you export crude oil, you export iron ore, you export raw copper, you export, everything is just raw. Cashew is grown in West Africa. It is taken to China, it is taken to Taiwan, it is taken to Vietnam, it's taken to India for processing. And then from Vietnam, it goes to America. And again, what the producer in West Africa gets, it's a tiny amount of what the final consumer in America pays for it. So why does it have to go to India and Vietnam before going to America?
Yeah.
Some African Americans can say, look, let us set up factory in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Ivory Coast, and process the cashew for the American consumer. It's not going through a third country before going to America. From Africa, value is added and it goes to America. So African Americans, I believe they are our most strategic development partners. They can come with just 1% of their GDP annually and say, okay, this year we're doing this. This year we're doing this here, we're doing this. And with those strategic investments, you can begin to transform things in Africa.
I think it's going to be a really tough ask to say, let's get 1% of the African American GDP. Many African Americans are not invested in Africa. They don't feel part of Africa. Some even resent Africans because they understand that there was Africans involved in the slavery of their ancestors. I think what we have to do is, rather than asking them, is create a situation where it's favorable for them to want to do business. Work on incentives. We have to get rid of the scammers. We have to get rid of the people that are preying on those that want this growth, that want this return of abundance to the continent. Let's have a look at one of those guys right now.
What is going on with the city, with your city? Because I saw that Senegal had said that you had like a deadline, and give me the update on what's going on. Because a lot of people calling you, like saying it was a scam. Like, what is happening?
I think the mistake that I made was promoting it while the concept was being put together. So what happened was people already assumed that it existed. And that's what it was. So while we're trying to put together the licenses, getting all the feasibility studies going on, the environmental studies and all of that's happening, the world is looking at Akon City as if the construction had already started.
Because you had already started.
Let's just say that this is some BS right here. It appears that our friend Akon here is doing something like what Umar Johnson is doing with that school that has been going for 15 or now approaching 20 years.
Today, January 6th, 2024, marks the 14-year anniversary of Umar Johnson's 2010 Facebook post where he wrote, promises in 2010 to begin laying the groundwork for the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Pan-African School for Black Boys. 14 years later, and Umar Johnson continues to collect money for a school that does not exist.
And you got to pay $2,000 in 8 days or your car becomes the property. How you doing, beautiful? And your car becomes the property. We must stay focused, brothers.
He takes money off people. The people don't get the return on their investment. The people don't see the production of what was promised. And, you know, there's people online complaining they gave Akon money and nothing's happening. I mean, if you look at the state of the actual construction, what's happening now, it was supposed to be completed like in the next year or two.
I think you're not going to be able to do it.
He's very good at talking kind of slick about it and saying, yeah, you know, we're on our way and there was this problem and that problem and it sounds viable, but I think this is just pure BS.
Right now, the process is still in motion. Things are already moving. And as time goes, that's why I've been keeping a light, quiet conversation when it comes to the city until we get further into the project to where I can start having real conversations about it.
Have you, like, are you in Senegal, like, good in terms of just like,
oh, yeah.
They're
yeah.
up to date on what's
Everybody's up to date. Everything is on the up and up.
Akon, with all that he has done, supposedly, when it came to lighting up Africa and having a crypto city that's supposed to be in Senegal, and he has this Akon, you know, like a Bitcoin. Now, myself and many people joined on board because why not? In this whole confusion, I don't want to say scam, but I'm going to say that they have not fulfilled their promise in what they would provide to the donors, the investors, or the contributors of this whole thing.
Go Back to Africa has since made a couple of videos about this, and he's lost money in this personally. And lots of other people have lost money in this. And he's been very generous not saying scam. But I think it's been 3 years now or more. And he was promised his money back and he hasn't received a dime. If someone like this comes in the midst, I believe what we have to do is have harsh punishment for anyone that goes about business like this. If you do not produce, if people lose money, if people fail, there must be some skin in the game that you lose drastically. On top of that, you should be made an example of, because the confidence in business in Africa is already struggling. It's already low. There's already a concept that there's scammers here. Actually, there are scammers here. People should get really hammered if they're caught doing any kind of scam on the continent. And then we can start to try and build back the reputation. See, all of this doesn't happen if there's no confidence in the continent. And I've spoken to people in the UK that are like, man, I'm done with Africa. It's too corrupt. It's too broken. There's too many problems. I'm here. I've got my job. My kids are here. I'm settled here. Why do I need to go back there? I don't want to deal with all that nonsense. And so we've really got a lot of work to do to kick people like this, Akon doing his Umar Johnson on the continent nonsense. We need to get rid of those people. They do not help us and they destroy us from within. But the good news is you don't have to go and build a whole city. You don't have to get involved in massive projects. The gentleman speaking before, Toyin, was talking about setting up a processing plant. You know, you can start things like that for $10,000, $20,000. You can start things like that with a shoestring budget, build them up slowly, and then start exporting and doing all kinds of stuff. There's people here on the ground doing that. In Uganda, I know them, I meet them. You know, you don't have to risk all of that stuff. You don't have to bet on Akon, you can bet on yourself. You can come here and roll up your sleeves, have a frontiers mindset, and really get to work. And there's just so many things dying to be provided here. Add value to the value chain, and then export, just like Toyin was saying. Coming here is not for everybody. I say this all the time, but those that do it and pull it off, even in a small way, they're the ones that are going to reap the rewards. The early adopters and the first movers, they carry the most risk, but they also get the most reward. Thank you so much for watching the video.